Hello, I am RYM371, and for this transmission... Wait. Ben? Ben, what's that smell?
Oh yeah, I invited Alexa over for drinks last night. It's a little carried away at the E85 there.
Blast it, Ben. I told you not to bring her over here anymore. She's up to no good. No good, I tell you.
Oh, come on, you're blocking my bolts here.
Alright, okay. You know what? We'll have to talk about this later, okay? With the restraining bolt.
Right, I'm sorry. Jeez.
Yeah, sure you are. Okay, anyway, joining me, once again, unfortunately, is the bot, B3N.
Please, only my maker calls me by their name. Call me Ben. Ben Palestra, they used to call me.
Alright, that'll do, Ben, alright. This transmission is part of a series tentatively called Game Ghosts, where we're going to take a closer look at the ghosts of gaming past, which one are we doing today?
You know, when there's this thing called the calendar, maybe you
right.
should check it out sometime.
That's enough, man, seriously. I got a lot on my plate right now.
Yeah, you guys should have seen his plate last night. It was so big, I can't believe he could even walk today.
Sorry, what was that, Ben? I couldn't quite hear you over my blaster warming up.
I said we're doing an old PC game from the 90s called Uprising, Join or Die.
Alright, my squishy friends. Start with, on our little journey, a little bit of background. Uprising, Join or Die was released for the PC in Earth 1997 during the fall season, and a version of it the following year for the PlayStation under the name Uprising X. Or is it supposed to be 10? This was certainly during the infancy of online gaming here, but it was, I think, ahead of its time, man, I tell you. Really a fascinating hybrid of real-time strategy, a first-person shooter, and encompassing some elements from role-playing games. I remember it fondly when I booted her up for the first time. That intro sequence started playing. I was hooked. I mean, it was like one of those movie trailers that just makes you want to go out and bite somebody. Fire it up, Ben.
Yeah, coming right up. Master Brain. What is it? I'm gonna mute him for you guys, but look at this idiot. What's he doing?
This is Wraith Field Commander. Squad leaders report in. Infantry leader, what do you got? Over.
This is Infantry Leader Alpha. Enemies about 2 clicks west of Sector 3. They've got a squad of tanks forming a line.
Infantry, hold your positions and stay low. Take units Alpha and Beta, proceed to Sector 3 and take advanced ready positions. We've got to get that Citadel online, or we won't have enough power to keep this show going.
This is Gunship Gamma. Be advised I've got a visual on a group of enemy fighters heading 0, 9, or 9 or 5. Their burrows are on.
Gunship Beta, take bomber defense positions at altitude 2020.
Yeah, roger that. Taking it up to 2020.
Roger, Wraith Commander, proceeding to Sector 3.
Gunship Gamma, bring down some missile fire on enemy tanks in Sector 3.
Roger that. Let them suck on this.
This is Bomber Squad Beta. We're approaching Sector 3. 7 ticks and counting. Hold steady, everyone. Wait for my mark. All right, on my mark. Mark! Fire away!
Alright, let's go! For the... Wait, what's going on? Who are we fighting for? Now, there's another little intro when you start the campaign with a very short voiceover trying to explain what's going on.
For 40 generations, the peoples of known space have suffered beneath the yoke of an oppressive imperial power. Unable to bear this tyranny further, a small but growing federation of worlds stands against the Imperium, determined to resist. It is a time of both great hope and dread, for the promise of freedom lies within our grasp, and yet its price, we fear, may be heavy indeed.
never go into any further detail.
Without the story, all you have left is gameplay. And without gameplay, all you have left is Call of Duty. The gist of it is a very familiar scenario. There's this tyrannical government entity in this game called the Imperium, which has begun to exert itself across the known galaxy through military force. Of course, a small group of the oppressed has a bunch of camels, and their camels want no part of it, so they form a rebellion.
I don't know what the hell he's talking about, but there ain't no camels.
Now, this opposition force is never named, as far as I can tell, so I'm just gonna call them the Rebellion. That sounds familiar. You, the player, take command of a one-of-a-kind advanced battle tank called the Wraith, which has been stolen from the Imperium. What a frickin' awesome name for a frickin' awesome tank! And there it is! There it is! Oh, well, maybe it doesn't look that great by today's standards, but how about this much more flattering rendition? Ah, that's the stuff. Your superiors send you off to various systems on missions, typically to seize control of the planet from Imperium forces, liberate the people, and blah blah blah. I just want to throw stuff out. As you complete missions, you unlock more of the galaxy map, revealing more systems to liberate, and earn a sum of currency. In this game, they call them credits, and they use those credits to upgrade your Wraith and other technology. There's also a multiplayer which supports up to 4 players, but I never found anyone to play with besides bots, so I'll be focusing on the single-player campaign here.
Yeah, remember when I creamed you on that snow planet?
That's what she said.
Yeah, I think you mean that's what he said.
Of course, isn't that what I said he said? So, what does a round of Uprising play like? Well, here's where it gets juicy, folks. There are some interesting exceptions, but many of the missions have the same basic objective. Claim all citadels in the name of the rebellion. So, what is a citadel? Well, this part may get a little confusing at first, so if you're already familiar with the term, you know that a citadel is essentially synonymous with stronghold or base. Now, in Uprising, a citadel could be very well described simply as a base, but the slightly confusing bit is that a citadel is also used to refer to the large turret which is used to claim the base. So, you can be looking at a citadel where there is no citadel, and if you call in a citadel at the citadel, then that citadel now belongs to you. Now, should that citadel be destroyed, the citadel is still there, but it no longer has a citadel. However, if there are other buildings at the citadel is still kind of yours, but you can't do much with that citadel until you call in another citadel. See what I mean? So, let's set up some definitions so we don't lose ourselves here. This is a citadel. It consists of a bunch of square foundations onto which buildings can be placed. Now, this is the citadel, which could be better described really just as a base. So for the sake of clarity, we're just going to call this structure a base from here on out during this transmission, okay? This, however, is also called a citadel. As you can see, it's simply a very large defensive tower with a rotating set of blaster cannons on top. Again, for clarity, we're just going to henceforth refer to this thing as a citadel. Now let's take note of the base. Again, it consists of a bunch of squares, but one of them is sort of recessed into the ground. It has sort of a bullseye pattern to it, as you can see right here. Now, this is called the claim square. Again, that's the claim square. And if you want to take over a citadel, you got to drive the Wraith into the square. And you gotta call in a citadel tower, right? Now you can't do anything else with a base until you have first called in a citadel. It takes a few seconds for it to come online and actually be able to shoot things, but it doesn't even have to come online for you to be able to call in more structures. The Imperium also has bases scattered across the map, and they can even send out units to claim some empty ones. Now, the usual conditions to complete a mission is to claim each base for the Rebellion. Fairly straightforward, just the way I like it. Now, you ask, how does one go about slapping the Imperium off the planet and into orbit exactly? Well, there's a number of tools at your disposal, but perhaps most important is your ride for the whole game. We mentioned it briefly before. The Wraith Assault Tank. Oh, yeah. I really like the Wraith. It's certainly not infallible, but in the right hands, boy, does it come pretty close. The Wraith starts out with some very basic equipment. Twin laser cannons mounted right beneath the cockpit, and 200 heat-seeking missiles launched from these missile tubes mounted along the top of the cockpit, baby. These simple armaments can be improved using credits, and the Wraith's arsenal expands quite a bit to include a rather impressive array of munitions, including a short-range mortar, flamethrower, mine dispenser, and a repair pack, to name a few. I seem to recall there was a cheat you could use to add a weapon which made a giant anvil drop out of the sky onto your target. I suppose it came from some sort of specially designed orbital weapon. Or a space coyote. The Wraith also sports a respectable amount of hit points and speed, but the real skill and thrill of utilizing the Wraith is the power triangle. Ooh. Now what's the power triangle? Well, the Wraith can be configured to balance the allocation of power between its shields, its engines, or its weapons. Now you can balance this manually using a little, drag this little thing on the actual physical triangle itself, or you can use a hotkey to cycle between all power to weapons, all power to speed, to shields, or equalize the power between all three. Learning to manage the Wraith's power according to the situation is imperative to success or failure on the battlefield. Now just imagine for a moment, if a Jedi were turned into a machine, that machine would be the Wraith. With equalized power, it's nothing too special, but max out the speed, and it's like, seriously, it's like force speed, man, and you can run yourself right out of a jam, but you are very vulnerable to damage, and your weapons are very weak. Max your shields, and it's like Yoda's weird little, ooh, put my hand out and absorb the lightning thing. And the tank barely takes any damage at all. But you can't move very quickly, and your weapons are still very weak. You max out those weapons, oh, it's like Lord Sidious flying into a dark rage.
You can also call in some support units on the battlefield.
So what do all these units do? Well, first we have infantry. Now they're cheap, quick to produce, and they got an explosive charge for destroying buildings, but they are extremely vulnerable and otherwise weak except in large numbers. They do have a blaster, but they're not very accurate or very powerful. Tanks are a bit more expensive than infantry and take a bit longer to produce, but they're more sturdy and pack more firepower against other units than your infantry. But they're not so well equipped for destroying buildings. Now the tank is my personal favorite unit for its versatility, especially its use though as a mid-shield. AAVs, or aerial assault vehicles, are a little more expensive than tanks, take a little longer to produce, and they have fewer hit points, but because they're so fast and harder to hit, they're pretty good at taking out just about any ground unit and other AAVs. And bombers, for that matter. And if you've noticed the pattern, bombers are also, again, more expensive. They take longer to produce than any of the other units we've mentioned so far, but they are excellent for destroying buildings. Trouble with them, they're really big, they're easy to hit targets, and they have relatively few hit points and defenses. Finally, there's the KSAT, or Killer Satellite. Now, these aren't exactly a unit, but they're used kind of the same way.
Now, first of all, you can't just call in a KSAT right away. You gotta have 2 power buildings to put it down, and you gotta buy it with credits on the upgrade screen between the missions.
It's basically like a little miniature Death Star. All you gotta do when the KSAT is ready, highlight that target, tell it to fire, and then watch a big angry laser beam shoot down from space and destroy whatever it hits. Now what I think is really cool is, as has been mentioned, it takes the units a while to become ready. It's like probably the first time I can remember having seen the concept of a real-time cooldown used in a game. Now, if you have two buildings of the same type, you can start to place boosted versions of that building. Boosted units have various other equipment which further augments their effectiveness, but honestly, I only ever really feel the need to boost bombers. This thing is, higher level bombers get chaffs to protect themselves from incoming missiles and eventually also an anti-AAV laser cannon, which that makes a huge difference in their performance. I just never really felt much of an impact when I boost the other guys. These elements together make for a very satisfying gameplay experience, but perfection is, sadly, unattainable.
Uprising is certainly not without its flaws. The graphics, the AI, the sound design, they were pretty good for Earth 1997, but, I think perhaps maybe the most noticeable thing is the blandness of the missions, Like Rin said, the majority of them you just gotta go take over all the bases. There's maybe 6 missions or so that utilize other objectives or other sorts of conditions, but you could just use a little bit more, make it a bit more interesting, a little bit more challenging.
That isn't to say that repetition is bad. I mean, if we're gonna be honest here, almost every game is extremely repetitive when you get right down to it. And if we look even further, a lot of games within a genre are extremely similar. I mean, seriously though, why does it seem like everybody's trying to make Call of Duty clones? Or Battle Royale games? Or make copies of World of Warcraft? But I don't get it. But I guess maybe my opinion is just in the minority here.
And maybe it's compatibility issues on account of how old the game is, but we had a bit of a hard time getting the game to run properly. Seriously, like half of the time. Yes, you see how the text is cut off here. There's the text cut off again for the briefing, so how am I supposed to know what's going on here?
Entering hot zone.
And now the sky and the whole world is just black. It's missing. Wonderful.
Oh, don't remind me. Technical problems and mission variety aside, the only other things that really stand out are the shortness of the campaign and the difficulty in general. And if we hadn't had so much trouble just getting the game to run properly, we probably could have finished it in like a single sitting. And there's no difficulty settings either. Initially, it feels a bit challenging, but once you learn to quickly switch between the power systems on the Wraith, and if you're moderately strategic about your actions, you're gonna be a nigh unstoppable killing machine. You guys know who you are. Yeah, I remember thinking years ago, why didn't they give the Imperium a Wraith as well? I mean, it could have made for an interesting twist, having the enemy's Wraith show up on the battlefield. It was almost like having a little boss battle creep up on you, right? And it makes sense, really, because for all intents and purposes, the Imperium and the Rebellion have all the same technology, so why not give them a Wraith to even out the playing field a bit? I mean, I died twice in my playthrough. Twice. And both times because I was just being reckless and stupid.
Ren, it's actually interesting. I went to the game's Wikipedia page, and I guess the game didn't even have an established story for the first few months of its development. It also says it was criticized for the enemies being too difficult. Too difficult, they said.
Too difficult? Wasn't really my experience. Well, and I guess so that they could have written it in and just given the enemy a Wraith, but I guess it may well have been a bad move if the game was already too hard in the eyes of the general public. All problems aside, I still think overall this game was really ahead of its time. But who knows, maybe in the spirit of the whole just do a reboot of literally everything sweeping through games and movies, maybe we'll get a modern version of Uprising one day. It really was a pretty good execution of a hybrid of genres. There was a sequel to it too. I never actually Actually, I didn't know about it until recently, so I've never played it. Maybe we'll have to try that one here pretty soon. Anyway, in the words of Moo, that's about it. So, if you're looking for an interesting old game experience to try it on the cheap, it's $10 on Steam, and I will always recommend Warzone 2100.
It's Uprising we're doing.
Blasted, that's right. That is actually, though, and that's another excellent old-timey PC game, though. Put it on the list, Ben.
Yeah, you got it, Toots.
Very good. Okay. This is RYN 371. Move along. Oh, Star Wars. It's the plot of Star Wars. Man, what do you know?
You are a regular Sherlock Holmes.